Okay. Not too bad. Not too bad. Doing a little experimenting here this morning on the Food Safety Chat Live, doing a little introductory video. Is it going to work? I don't know. Let me know in the commentaries we're going here if you like that or not. Got some other surprises coming up here in the chat as well. But in the meantime, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Bryan Armentrout with Culture Advisory Group. And if you're new here, this is Food Safety Chat Live. And every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, we live stream. And I get to bring an amazing guest on the chat. And we're going to talk about a food safety topic with you. And what you'll notice here is this is not a lecture. This is not meant to be a one-way data dump of information. This is meant to be a conversation, because that's how food safety improves, is we share information and we learn best practices and we get better. And if you're someone who's a regular on the chat, which we are blessed with having quite a few regulars here on the chat, you're going to recognize my guest, my friend, Dr. Doug Marshall with Eurofins. How are you doing today, Doug?
Very good, Bryan. Happy to be back.
In beautiful Colorado. So Doug and I live about half hour or so apart. And today, not to rub it in too much, but it's going to be 70 or so. So around 19, 20 degrees C here in beautiful Colorado. And so this is one of those rare occasions in your yard. And I'll give my wife full credit for this because she's been doing all the work. Is you actually can clean up your leaves before the snow comes and turns them into a wet, sloppy, gooey, unmovable mess that you have to then deal with in the spring. So as we talk about here in the chat, guys, is put in here where you're listening to in the world. I'm in Loveland, Colorado. Douglas is in Fort Collins, and it's kind of the two areas kind of merged into this big mega area here in northern Colorado. You have the Denver metro area, and then you have Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley, Longmont's kind of joining that party. We're all kind of sandwiched in here together. Good. And Austin is here this morning. Good morning, Austin. Dayton. Oh, cool. Mike in Dayton. Nice town. I like Dayton. So with that, one of the things that we love to do here on the chat, if you are new to the chat, is I like to torture my guests and you with a dad joke. So Doug, are you ready?
Unfortunately, yes.
All right. So I tried to find something topical for you. So if you don't know, Doug is the Chief Science Officer at Eurofins. So he's the expert in all things micro. So you should know the answer to this one. So Doug, why are students not allowed into the biology teacher's lounge at the school?
Don't know, Bryan. Why?
Well, Doug, it's for staff only.
There.
Oh, hey, come on, not that bad. Oh, all right. What's funny is I asked AI what its interpretation of that joke was, and here's what it came up with. So you got the forlorn staff there, and the poor. I don't know. It looks more like coronavirus more than staff, I would say. So look how sad.
Close enough.
Yeah, not a bad attempt by AI. We'll give you partial credit for that. So one of the things when we have you on the chat, Doug, is catching up and figuring out where in the world you've been, because you go everywhere. And if you're a client of Eurofins, that's one of the best things that they do, in my opinion, is the customer support and working with clients and helping when they have issues. Eurofins is not just a testing lab; they do all kinds of support for their clients as well. So awesome on that job. So what's been keeping you busy on that side? Where were you at in the world?
Well, I was working in Europe last couple of weeks, and probably the one thing that I did that I had the most joy with. I won't talk about the work. I'll just talk about, I'm in Europe, so can I carve out a day or two to enjoy myself? So I was visiting our big central lab in Denmark, and I had a weekend free. So I went to Malmo, Sweden, and I went to the Disgusting Food Museum. And the first thing they give you when you buy your ticket to go in is a barf bag. So I thought, what venue could be better for a guy like me who's done this as a profession for 40 years
Uh-huh.
to be able to go into a place that just absolutely glorified disgusting and unsafe food.
Oh my
So
God.
if you guys are ever in that part of the world, it's not a big museum, but it's really well done, and a lot of fun.
No, I got to ask, what was the highlight? What was the thing that was like, all right, yeah, that's gross. What was the?
Well, they had some of the usual things that I'm assuming that many attending today's call will be familiar with. So things like toxic mushrooms, the Italian cheese wheel that they let get magnetized
Oh,
to
yes, I've heard of that.
liquefy the curd. There were other things, snakes and insects and the like. And a few of the examples were bulging canned food.
Mhm.
So the one thing that I found most intriguing, however, I can't really share with you, but I'll give you an example where I personally had something similar. So they had things like snakes. And, I have had rattlesnake
Yeah, yeah.
barbecued that, bottom line is it tasted like chicken. Now, was it good enough for me to go out there and be uh, an amateur collector for the weekend grill? No. But the one that I personally would call the most disgusting food I've ever eaten was frog sperm soup in China. I want to repeat that so everybody has an opportunity to think about this. Frog sperm soup. And then maybe folks can offer an opinion on what they think it actually tasted like in the chat. So that might be kind of
Man.
fun to see how people, if you are presented with such an item, would you or would you not go ahead and take a bite? Another one that I've personally done is live octopus in Korea, where
Mm.
they took a live octopus, snipped it into bite-sized pieces, and then you had to use your chopsticks and it came out on a big platter, and all the pieces were wiggling on the platter. And as a somewhat sufficiently talented chopstick user like me, trying to grab a piece of that wiggly stuff on the platter was a challenge. But once I finally got one, I was told very sternly by my host that you must chew it thoroughly before swallowing. Otherwise, one of the suckers might get stuck in your trachea and you could die of asphyxiation.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've seen pictures. I've seen videos of that too, with like the tentacles kind of. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyhow, I'm just looking here, salty and slimy. I wonder how some people think that might be the flavor of frog sperm soup, but good guess. It
Yeah.
actually was delicious, and I tried to figure out by having a conversation with the staff at the restaurant just exactly how do you collect enough frog sperm to put in a soup. And then it dawned on me that male frogs and female frogs, they're lek breeders. And
Hmm.
what a lek breeder does is the female will deposit a mass of eggs, and then the boys will come along and um, give their donation to that mass. So it becomes a slimy mass. So I don't know how you separate the eggs from the sperm. Or maybe there was no frog sperm in there at all. It was just the name of the dish to make people intriguing to say, "Hey, Uncle Dougie, this one's special for you tonight."
Yeah. Hey, let's see what the white American thinks of this. Oh yeah. There's so many different foods out there. Bird's nest soup. Yeah, I've never tried that. A lot of these really gross ones. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever try gooey duck. Yeah, no, thank you. Good old Philippine delicacy. Look it up. I'm not going to tell you. Look it up. Gooey duck. So, on that note, everybody, I'm sure your appetite is whetted for your coffee or beverage of the morning. So join Doug and I. Cheers. Oh, it just tastes that much better now. So, guys, in the news, it's again, and so as we were preparing for this and talking about it, it's just we just seem to have big recall after big recall after recall, and a lot of times it just seems that they're linked to suppliers. So the big one that's making the rounds now, which I think is probably going to go on for quite a while, is this recall for listeria in pasta. And you're like, pasta? How in the world does pasta have listeria? And as this case is evolving with the supplier, the parallels to Peanut Corporation of America, not necessarily the criminality, but just the distribution methodology, where these manufacturers of you name it, think of all these different things that pasta goes into. They're buying this pre-made pasta from the supplier because it's cheaper than making it themselves, and then putting it in everything. So you're making frozen entrees or you name it. And now they have this massive recall. And the thing with this too, then, Doug, is okay, I'm making frozen entrees and I have a pasta base and put whatever else is in there and then freeze it. That stuff is sitting around now in that frozen state for a really long time. Inventories on these are huge, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of went through the same thought process when I saw the first press release on this. And I thought, well, why aren't manufacturers just getting dry pasta and boiling it up and using it as needed?
Yeah.
And the answer is pretty simple, is that requires some capital cost to put in a large kettle to boil your pasta. And if you're a big manufacturer, it's much more of a convenience factor just to buy it pre-boiled, refrigerated, or frozen, and you just open up your boxes and your bags and away you go. So I understand the convenience factor from a manufacturer's side, but the other thing that I think is probably an issue, and definitely related to what happened with Peanut Corporation, is I honestly cannot name a co-man out there that actually makes ready-to-use pasta. That implies to me that there just might be one supplier out there that everybody's using. And so if that one supplier has an issue, it affects potentially hundreds, if not thousands of SKUs across multiple different brands.
Exactly.
And so, if you're doing a hazard analysis on pasta, most people are going to go, okay, I've got dried pasta. We know there has been salmonella outbreaks associated with dry pasta, not because it survives the boiling process you're going to use, but because of cross-contamination.
Right.
But for listeria, this was, once again, we were outsmarted by a little tiny microorganism.
Yeah, my thinking was along that same line as well. And so in my mind, I'm picturing at the manufacturers. If you're a large manufacturer, you're buying totes, 2,000-pound totes full of pasta, truckloads of this pasta coming in. Odds are you're not using a complete tote every time. You may be switching formulas and using different styles and mixing and matching. I just picture people going into these totes time and time and time again and potentially cross-contaminating. If you have one tote that has listeria and the other ones are fine, now all of a sudden, surprise, now they all have listeria. And this whole cross-contamination piece is huge. So I was thinking about there was a recall a number of years ago, Doug. I'm sure you remember this as well too. It was roasted sunflower seeds for listeria, and I was like, "What? How? It's really easy to kill listeria with heat. How in the world?" And later it came out, to your point, cross-contamination. They were roasting the nuts and then storing them with the raw nuts after they were done, and then off it goes. That was crazy. So we've seen this in the past before from food companies where you have an issue like this. Nobody's eating raw pasta, Doug. I mean, come on. You're going to put it in this frozen spaghetti dish, and then the consumer is going to cook it. So everything's fine, right? There's no big deal.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't want to, really poo-poo the pasta industry because it's a tough industry to be in. And when I say tough, I mean physically, manually challenging to clean and sanitize a dry pasta manufacturing environment.
Yeah.
Because that pasta dough, you've got your blenders, you've got your extruders, and most likely you're going to try and do dry cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a bear to keep a facility like that under proper sanitary condition. So, once you extrude the pasta, then you go ahead and dry it, and then you bag it up or box it up, depending on the end use. And so, it's after that heating step, and this is not a high pressure, high temperature extrusion process. So that raw pasta is in fact raw, even though it's dry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to figure too, and this is just pure extrapolation on our part, which is the hard thing of what we do in food safety is we have to guess where the problems were at the source. We don't get to see. That needs to be fixed. But you have to figure too, Doug. It's like, okay, I'm this company making this cooked pasta for all these manufacturers. I'm not going to be cooking the pasta all the way. I'm probably just giving a really quick dosage of boiling water to just get it to like, a little less than an al dente state, knowing that then the end consumer, when they cook that frozen entree, is going to be finishing up the cooking process. So even though this pre-made pasta is cooked, it's probably not cooked very long. It's probably a very quick heat exposure. And then they got to cool it back down right away to stop that process. Cooling process. Oh, hey, listeria. We like that, don't we? So you can kind of start piecing the pieces of the puzzle together here, can't you?
Yeah. If I don't know how many people joining us today have ever worked in the kitchen of an Italian restaurant. They are not taking dry pasta and boiling it for 10 minutes prior to preparing your plate. So they have warming drawers that have pretty much par cooked, if not thoroughly cooked pasta, sitting in big globs right next to the stove, and then they will simply refresh it by dropping it into the pot of boiling water to get it nice and piping hot, and then it's immediately plated. So, okay, so is that exposure to the boiling water long enough to kill anything that might have grown in that pasta drawer? For vegetative cells, could be, most likely.
Yeah.
For spore formers, such as Bacillus cereus, maybe not. But again, the risk is pretty low because the consumer is just going to go ahead and eat it. They're not going to, oh, wait, all you can eat at Olive Garden, take stuff home and then temperature abuse it. Yeah, so maybe that there is risk there as well.
Or at the end of the night, after a busy shift at the Olive Garden, you have a half full tray of your pasta. Like, oh, well, we'll save this for tomorrow. And then it just continues day after day, right? Rework in the food industry is a big no-no. It's something you always have to watch out for. I wanted to close the loop back on my earlier comment of hey, the consumer's going to cook the product, we're fine. Actually, this theory was tested with pot pies. There was I believe it was salmonella, Doug, if I remember right. And the manufacturer of the pot pies in the court case said, well, the consumer is going to take this pot pie and cook it. Nobody eats raw pot pies. They're going to kill the bacteria, the salmonella in that pot pie. So we're good. And the judge said, no. You cannot rely on the consumer to handle your food safety problem for you. That's your job. Okay.
Well, that raises the question, if the pasta, well, I know this pasta was used in frozen entrees that presumably were ready to eat. And so the consumer is going to pop it in the microwave, nuke it for 3 minutes. Are they going to wait that extra minute before they start eating? No, they want instant gratification. Right. So many consumers will intentionally underwarm a frozen entree because they don't want to have to wait, and they don't want something that's really that hot to start eating it. So they're going to figure out exactly how many minutes on their microwave to nuke this product, and then they're good to go. So is that enough reheating to kill pathogens? We have many examples where that's not true. Now, from a brand owner's perspective, one question asked, do you not eliminate the risk by putting reheating instructions on your label? Is that a big enough defense for you to fight off a lawsuit if you make someone sick or you kill somebody with your product because they couldn't follow your instructions, which, by the way, are written in English?
And yeah, that's, I mean, from an FDA standpoint, that's a slam dunk. All they have to do is come in court and say, okay, food manufacturers, you only have, under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, 2 hurdles that you need to always meet, and that's misbranding and adulteration. And if your product is adulterated, it is adulterated. It cannot be undone. And you have sold your product to those consumers in an adulterated state, pay up. Nestle, I think, had the same issue with cookie dough at their plant, where there was E. coli in the cookie dough. And the same precedent was held up by the courts. Are like, no, you can't do that. In this case, that people are eating raw cookie dough. It is a fact. They are abusing the product. They're not following your instructions. So your defense is ridiculous. And they lost that one big time.
Yeah. So I guess the theme that I'm interested in chatting with you about today is all of these recalls and outbreaks are caused. I mean, the direct root cause, you could blame the supplier, but really, if your product isn't affected, the root cause is you have a faulty supplier verification plan.
Yes.
Because you either didn't do your ingredient supplier hazard analysis correctly, meaning there was something that you missed where you failed to truly understand the risk profile of that ingredient and how it's being made, or you have identified the hazards, you had an expectation that the supplier was going to manage those risks, but the failure is your verification strategy was wholly inadequate to detect and out of compliance with that supplier.
Right.
So in either of those 2 cases, there are a bunch of different things you can do that, in my experience, most people aren't doing because they have this industrial crutch that they walk around with. And that is the only supplier verification activity we do is the supplier certified under a GSFSI auditing scheme. If they are, that check is the box on my supplier verification.
Yep, I've got my pretty COA. I'm good. Really. And you bring up a different and very important point here, Doug, and I want to make sure, because this is going to be a theme through the rest of our chat here today, is that a lot of times when we look at risk associated with ingredients in our products, we're looking at it too narrowly. We may say, oh, okay, pasta. Yeah, all right, let's take a look at pasta. Let's look up pasta in the FDA appendix and we'll see what they consider to be biological hazards. Okay, great. I have a base now to start. As we talked about earlier, Bacillus cereus or staph, things producing enterotoxin, which becomes heat stable, yada, yada. But there's an important element that's missing here as well. Is, okay, fine, you understand the risk associated with that material. What's the severity and likelihood of that particular material? What you just said a little bit ago is extremely important. Is the risk associated with the material equally risky for every single supplier that supplies that raw material? Hell no. If I'm buying olive oil from a shady backdoor place that's selling it at 10% the cost of normal virgin olive oil, right, I have a much higher risk with that raw material, and I need to take actions to prevent potential issues. When the procurement group switches suppliers because they found somebody who's really, really cheap, is that risk taken into account? And a lot of times the answer is no.
Correct. And, this whole pasta scenario is, I'll bet you, I honestly, I haven't done this, but I'll bet you if you go in and you look at FDA's hazards guide, that if you look up pasta, the commentary is probably limited to dry pasta. So the actual product type and its intended use is not reflected in the quote, official guidance document from FDA. So that's another big fault in supplier verifications is people rely on these quick and easy resource documents to conduct their hazard analysis, but it may be wholly ineffective for the product you're actually sourcing and how you're going to use it.
Yes. And your application is always unique. And so this is part of something I think that we need to emphasize constantly when you're putting together your food safety plans and your mitigation strategies is we tend to write these documents and then go, all right, work's done. I will reassess it according to what FDA says when we have a change in our process or some other type of change or once a year. And I'm fine, and I'll get together the team later. Does procurement understand that? And what does change mean? Does the procurement group in your company at corporate, oh, by the way, do you ever go to corporate and audit and talk with your people at corporate? These people have an incredible influence on the risk profile at your facility. If behind the scenes, that pasta manufacturer switches and they change contracts out, do you even know? Or does that stuff show up at your dock and all of a sudden now that COA looks a little different, or you didn't get a COA? And now all of a sudden you've got a truckload of this pasta. You have no idea where it came from. No idea who the supplier is. Put it on hold. Operations is angry. You're trying to track down somebody in procurement who bought this stuff, and they don't even think it's a big deal. And as a matter of fact, they're happy, right? They saved the company $500,000 a year by finding this cheaper pasta supplier.
Yeah, they were doing their job.
Yes, right.
So how do you find? Yeah. So how do you find fault with that? And you can't.
No.
But again, that's where food safety culture and communication and food safety teams. If you're leaving procurement out, that's a big miss.
Yes. I'll give a shout out to Nestle because they always did a really good job at this. When Nestle brings a new supplier on board, they have enhanced sampling programs. And they don't trust that new supplier. It's like, well, here's my COA. Hey, that's nice. I'm going to be pulling samples from your trucks, and I'm going to be doing that for a certain number of trucks. And if I get good results, then I'll kind of lower my sampling program a little bit. And then if that's good, then I'll bring you to baseline of what I have for my other suppliers. Nestle understands that it's the supplier who's managing, who is an integral part of the risk. It's also the material they're sending, and they understand that.
Yeah, here's one that I'm seeing with a big brand owner. And I've been thinking about this one for quite a bit because the ask of their supply chain is really quite substantial. So I'm going to spin the scenario. I'm using a co-man and they're manufacturing an ingredient for me, and they're serving a bunch of other customers using basically the same process. But all their other customers are sourcing not ready-to-eat ingredients. Mm-hmm. Okay, as am I. However, I want this co-man to be producing my ingredient under ready-to-eat manufacturing environment. So remember, this ingredient is not ready to eat. I have a kill step in my process, but I still want the supplier to supply me with this ingredient that has been manufactured to ready-to-eat standards. Mm-hmm. And the brand owner's reason for this is because they don't want to be bringing salmonella or listeria into their facility.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if you're the co-man, this is a really big ask, because your entire facility has been designed and operated for years making non-ready-to-eat ingredients. Now you've got one big customer that says, we're going to throw a lot of money in your lap if you can make this to ready-to-eat standards.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that triggers a whole new level of control in that facility for everything.
Correct. So I guess my question to the audience would be, if you are in a similar scenario as this manufacturer that I'm working with, what if you asked all of your suppliers for all of your ingredients to have the same expectation? that even though you're not considering it an RTE ingredient, you want it manufactured as if it is.
Sure, here's your new quote. Double the previous quote, and then everybody has a heart attack.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Sean is asking this question facetiously or not, but gee, do you not test against the COA in the food industry? Sometimes. Generally, we're doing this on faith. And a lot of times, Sean, you'll get this response back. Well, Doug, we have a continuing guarantee with our supplier. So if there's something wrong, we can sue them. We're covered. We're fine, right?
Yeah, Sean brings up a great point, and I'll give you some examples. If you are a smaller operator where, every penny in cost counts, then basically you are expecting your supplier to provide that test analysis on the lot that you're receiving. And for most people, that is literally blind trust that that one sample that was tested is truly representative of the entire lot that you're going to receive. Okay.
Right.
Now then, if you are a big consumer goods corporation where your brand is highly valued, I'm aware that not many, but a few of these big brand owners will test every lot that they receive, despite the fact that their supplier had already done so, and their supplier could have provided a letter of guarantee. Your purchase specifications say they're supposed to do this. So everybody in the system's doing what you're asking them to do, but you still want that last definitive verification data point before you use that lot.
Yeah. Well, and a couple of comments around that. Let's say, for example, we'll continue with our ready-to-eat pasta example that we're going through here today. Is I inform my supplier that I'm going to be putting it on hold and testing for Listeria before I use that product. As a supplier, I'm very unhappy that you're doing that. Because now if you find something, now FDA is coming to my plant and looking for problems with other stuff. Now I also have to wait, depending on the test. If I'm a plant, I don't have pathogen testing capability in most cases in my facility. I'm sending it out to Eurofins for testing. And now I have to wait for that turnaround. So now that pasta, which is in this high moisture state, sitting in tubs, sitting in the fridge, you may be creating another problem. Now it's getting moldy or God knows what. And out of this 40,000 pounds of pasta, Doug, that I received on this truck, I tested 25 grams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some suppliers simply will not honor a contract that says, openly says, oh, and by the way, we're going to do random lot testing of your material. Now, if you're the buyer, do you need to disclose that in your purchase agreement? I don't think so.
As a QA guy, I would say no, right?
Correct.
Back to the, yeah.
But if your supplier in their contract, in their red line markup of the agreement says, you will not be testing any of our ingredients for pathogens.
I have seen
yeah, exactly. So how do you move that relationship forward where both sides win, but also both sides don't wind up in mutual suicide?
Yes. And now imagine as well that this particular raw material is a proprietary ingredient that you're using in your product. It's a superfood or what have you. And that's the only supply source. And you have to buy it from them. Now you're really over a barrel because you're taking this risk and you don't even know.
Yeah, my favorite one is coconut. So, anything related to coconut, there are very few suppliers out there. And if you put these kinds of expectations in a purchase agreement, they'll just laugh.
Yeah.
They'll just say, I can move every ounce of product that we manufacture. Plenty of people want it. No.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. The other side of this as well, too. So in a past company, we did a gigantic supplier assessment. So this was part of the now not in business Dean Foods. And so we had 3 different divisions and we got together and we said, okay, now that all of these 3 companies, White Wave, Morningstar Foods, and Dean Foods are all together, let's go through and do a supplier assessment of what we're actually buying. Because the particular model with Dean Foods, and you see this a lot in the food industry, is acquisition. So Dean Foods would buy a small mom and pop dairy operation and say, fantastic, we now own you. Start sending all your money to us instead of to whoever went before. Have a nice day. And then off they would go. They pretty much, from their viewpoint, work continued just the way it was. Great. All right. Well, that creates a huge supplier problem as well. So we did this giant assessment. We ended up, Doug, with, it was close to 6,000 different raw materials that were purchased in the company. We found 27 varieties of strawberry flavor. Strawberry flavor. And that doesn't necessarily mean 6,000 manufacturers, but there was 6,000 different things that we were buying. Impossible. I would be auditing to this day, right? I would die 90 years old and maybe get 5% of the way through. So we were faced with a huge problem. It's like, oh man, how do we deal with this? So we said, okay, let's think about what are the highest risk materials, exactly what we're going through here, based upon different criteria. So sensitivity in products, history with the company. It was a gigantic task to get through. What was interesting was most of the things that ended up in that final list, and it was still about 10%, so 600 SKUs. Most of those things, Doug, were, and you probably won't be surprised to hear this, ice cream. Because you were completely reliant on the manufacturer of the cookie crumbles or the fudge swirl or all those materials. After you make that ice cream mix base, everything was going in post-pasteurization of the mix. So you were completely reliant on those manufacturers. And you were using lots and lots and lots of stuff. And so we got together with those guys and put together a management plan. And we were able to cut out a lot of suppliers too and reduce duplication. But it was a gigantic task.
Yeah. Cortland provided an interesting comment here on supplier lot testing. And I'll just give you an example, an interesting one, where there was a buyer who said, we're going to do skip lot testing. So, we just want to make sure it's a high risk ingredient. We're expecting the suppliers to take care of the food safety hazards, but we need our own verification. And so they decided that they were going to test every fifth lot. Well, guess what? The supplier figured that out. And so on lot 1, 2, 3, and 4, they were routinely shipping number 2 and number 3 grade material. On the 5th lot, they would ship the number 1. And they had been doing that for years before the buyer figured out that they were being duped because of a clever supplier.
Yep. Here's another one in that similar vein. Okay, Doug, here's how I'll get around that problem that Bryan was talking about with testing the pasta. I'll ask for a pre-shipment sample, and then I'll test the pre-shipment sample. Okay. You really think that pre-shipment sample is from what you're getting? Maybe.
Yeah, I've gone into some QC manager offices and seen boxes of products sitting there, and I kind of go, is that your retain? And they're like, I can't really tell you what it's for, but I'm guessing that's the product that they know is clean of whatever attribute their customer is asking for a pre-shipment sample for. So we'll just pull a 500 gram sample out of this bag and ship it off, and there you go, because we know it's going to be
absolutely middle of the spec.
We know it's going to be in spec.
Exactly. And guess what? To your point earlier, Doug, the suppliers of these ingredients aren't stupid. If you're a customer of theirs and you're a pain in the butt and you're testing every lot and everything that comes back is a complaint, you're going to ship your good stuff to them. If you're a customer that doesn't check, if you're a customer that doesn't cause any grief, if there's something that's borderline, it's going to that customer. And you're going to start getting the bottom of the barrel and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. And when I say in spec, I'm not always referring to some food safety attribute. And I'll give you an example. There was, I got a call from a manufacturer said and they were making a dip. I'm not going to tell you what kind of dip it is, but just think of a dip in a plastic cup, consumer size cup. And they said, our dip is basically turning into concrete. Okay. Do you know why? No, that's why we're calling you, Doug. Said, okay. So went through the usual, 50 questions and get 50 answers to try and narrow down what the potential root causes were. I said, have you changed ingredient suppliers of anything recently? They started thinking, no, the only thing we changed was our garlic powder. Said, okay. Were the same purchase specifications? They're like, yeah, but we've got a really good deal on this batch of garlic powder. So, ding, light bulb goes off. I said, okay, when you say really good deal, what do you mean? Well, it's the same particle size, same flavor profile. Did you verify that it was going to perform before you manufactured this gigantic lot? No, it's garlic powder. Why would we do that? And this garlic powder was cut with starch. Okay. So not a food safety issue, but basically it formed a starch gel that when solidified, it turned this nice semi-viscous dip into rock hard hockey puck.
Oh my God.
And so, there's a reason why they were able to source cheaper garlic. Now you might ask the question, was this an illegal adulteration event? Or was this just trying to meet the customer's expectation?
Yeah. So this goes back to the corporate side of it. So you can picture the conversation. The procurement guy is scanning around trying to find ways to reduce costs. He's out there and he finds a supplier with a garlic powder that's half the price, to your point. And it's like, well, what's the difference? Garlic powder's garlic powder. I'll buy a truckload of that and we'll see how it goes. And man, is my boss going to be happy with me. Into the plant it goes. That garlic powder, right? So with that blend, to your point, you have no idea what that was originally blended for. Let's say, for example, and so when you were going down that path, the first thing that came to mind for me was like some type of a gum or a stabilizer of some type within that, and that garlic was meant for a completely different application. Let's say it was going into a garlic sauce in back to our pasta examples, where you need more ability in that sauce to be viscous. Completely wrong application. In the real world, it should have been, right? You go to R&D, you try it out, and you do some bench tops, and they would have prevented this. The odds are, when that company went back, I'm kind of curious on the aftermath of this, Doug. Hey, you made our dip into hockey pucks, and that manufacturer's going to be like, I gave you my specification. This isn't my fault. This is your fault. Good luck getting your money back on that.
Yeah. So again, I don't know the end result of that relationship, but if the supplier legitimately declared that this was garlic powder that had a flow aid added, and the flow aid happened to be 1% starch, then maybe it wasn't intentional adulteration.
Right.
So
interesting. Cortland is talking here about, certified glassware. So Cortland owns a lab. And just because you have a certificate doesn't mean it's good. At Leprino Foods in my past, I used to deal with the whey products. I was technical manager as one of my last roles there. And we would have downgrade product that didn't quite meet spec. And there was different levels of that. And we would then source it to different secondary markets where that product was okay for. And the bottom of the specification limit before it was garbage was animal feed in a lot of cases. And we had very strict relationships with the people we sold this to. And if there was somebody outside of that network, we were always very skeptical, and generally we wouldn't sell to them. But I would always start every conversation with, this is downgrade product. This is the certificate. If we find in any way that this product gets into the marketplace, because we can track it based on lot code, if we find out that this stuff is used in applications where it's being warranted as good product, you'll never see another piece of business from us again. And Loprino Foods is a significant player in that market. You could not afford to do that. And did I catch people? Yeah, caught a couple small guys who were doing that. And then they were immediately cut off, and we never, ever sold to them again.
Yeah. So I'm going to pose this question to the group, since today's topic is supplier verification. And I just gave you the example where a lot of people do one thing and then they stop. And that's, do you have an SQF, a BRC, or whatever audit certificate? And maybe you ask, what's your score? So I've been in facilities where the food safety quality assurance manager, is having problems with a pathogen. And they're like, yeah, but I got a 94 on my SQF audit last time. Like, so microbes don't read those. Let's look at your process. And just, this was death by 1,000 GMP issues. And, how you could pass an audit in a facility that literally was not fit for purpose, go figure. But that happens.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about, or I'll just ask the group, can you post some other supplier verification activities beyond just asking, show me your food safety cert? So, we've talked a little bit about lot testing. Okay. Are there other things you could do? And I'll just give you an example and see what people think. Maybe you could do a first party audit. You go in and audit your supplier or someone from your team. So you actually have a food safety team whose responsibility is to periodically go in and take a look at what's going on in this facility that's making your high risk product. So maybe the next question then becomes, is that announced or unannounced?
Yeah. So there's a reason why supplier control is listed as a preventive control in FSMA. It's because it's so damn important. And we see recall after recall after recall that are linked back to the suppliers and all these assumptions of oh no, it's fine. And really what we're talking about here, Dave, is how do you then put together a program to verify that your suppliers are actually doing what they say they're doing? We've seen in here several times, Sean said, that famous saying, trust but verify. You need to have a program in place. And again, going back to my Dean Food thing, can I audit everybody? Good God, no. So I need to figure out who should I be auditing? How many resources do I have? And how can I put together some programs around that? And to reemphasize the point I made earlier is you need to look at the risk of the material and the risk from the supplier. The supplier introduces risk into this process as well. Also, unique ingredients that you have to buy from, large volume ingredients. So I can guarantee that the customers of this pasta supplier weren't thinking about this, but they were using oodles and oodles of noodles in their processes. A major significant impact. And if the food safety manager was thinking about it, he would have been like, wow, if there's something wrong with these noodles that we're getting, we got a big problem. Maybe we should pay close attention to that. But to your point, Doug, then you get that pushback. You start saying, okay, I'm going to start testing incoming shipments, time, money, upset schedules. Oh, this didn't pass. We reject it. It's a lot of pressure. You need to build these things in up front. The time to have these conversations with these potential new suppliers is before the contract is signed. You have the most leverage as a QA food safety person with your procurement group before the agreement is made, because that supplier wants the money, right? They want the sale. So if you come in and say, and you have a program in place with your procurement group that says, any new supplier, this is what happens and this is what gets triggered. We want to do testing of your products before we're going to give you full certification status. You're going under a 90-day probation period. We want samples. We want specifications, and you build that into your planning schedule up front, that supplier is going to be much more malleable at that point in time because they want that contract. They want to be able to sell that stuff to you. Once it's a done deal and you're at the plant trying to manage this on the backside, good luck.
Yeah. So here's one that I see. I just absolutely don't understand why this happens, but I'll spin a scenario, and I want to start by giving you a personal example. So I went to a conference, and it was in Florida, and they had an outside buffet where for lunch, and they had luncheon meats on the buffet, and they had this little standard with a little card proudly serving boar's head meat. And this was right after the big recall and outbreak. So using that as an example, I would pose this question: why would anyone continue to do business with a brand or with a supplier that is in the news for a recall or an outbreak? So if you did not change your relationship with that supplier, bad on you. Okay. Now then, I'll give you another example. There is a very large, very well-known brand that surprisingly has a reputation in the industry of being a leader in food safety. And they manufacture ready-to-eat products and ingredients, okay, with no kill step in their process. Okay. Because the materials they're selling cannot be heat treated. All right. You guys can think about examples of that. But anyway, this supplier for the last 20 years has been involved in deadly outbreaks of salmonellosis and enterotoxigenic E. coli. Yet, people still source these ingredients from this supplier. So any one example of a company like this who has their brand splashed in the news, I don't know what better verification data you need to be able to demonstrate that that supplier is maybe not fit for doing business with.
Right.
It's also verification data point that says your supplier verification program failed because you purchased affected product from the supplier. So I see a lot of people when this happens, their root cause is it was the supplier's problem rather than it was our failure in our supplier verification problem.
Right.
So there are very proactive things and reactive things you should be doing if you are a victim of a supplier's indiscretion. And a lot of people just don't do that.
No. And so in my mind, a scenario, and I do this with clients sometimes, I bet you do this too, Doug, is I'll say, okay, given that scenario you just talked about, Doug, if I was Bill Marler in a court case, would you be able to defend yourself and your supplier program? Hell no. He would tear you apart. Absolutely tear you apart.
Yeah, and using a legal parlance, is your supplier verification program beyond a reasonable doubt effective? And if there is reasonable doubt anywhere in that program, what does that tell you? You have an opportunity to improve it.
Yes.
And again, using, is everything I'm doing, do I have any number of get out of jail cards, or am I personally vulnerable to a lawsuit because I'm the food safety quality manager of the company that made this product that was out of spec because of a supplier problem?
Right. Because if you're the preventive control qualified individual in that plant, you're signing off on those loads going out. So I think part of this, and we're at the 5-minute mark here, so we'll kind of wind up here, but this gets back to risk again, right? It's managing risk. Do I have the resources to go out and audit every single supplier? No. I need to figure out what's the best way to mitigate that risk based upon all the different variables we've been talking about here today. And Keanu brings up a good point here as well. Well, my boss didn't like all this stuff because this is costing a ton of money. Okay, that's a failure in food safety culture because corporate doesn't understand why this is important and why this is non-negotiable. And I'm sure you see this too, Doug, time and time again. There's a disconnect between what the plant is doing and what corporate is doing. And it's not because they're bad people, they just don't understand. And so the conversations we're having today are conversations I have with procurement people at corporate. And say, okay, well, walk me through your programs of how you do things, how you buy, how you select suppliers, how you evaluate them, how you determine if they're good or not. And you already know the answer on that. It's like, well, I am judged in the procurement group based upon orders on time, cost per pound, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll say, well, what about food safety? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? No. What happens if there's a recall that happens because of a raw material that you purchased under your program? Well, you get some variation of that's not my problem. That's why we got that food safety guy over there, right? And that's a very bad approach. And that is the opposite of food safety culture. We think that food safety culture is somehow encapsulated in what we do. It's what the company does.
Yeah, I always counsel people do the math to determine the cost of your food safety investment versus the cost of being litigated in a recall or an outbreak situation. So rather than have food safety being and quality being part of the cost ledger on a P&L, think of it as an insurance policy to protect your revenue.
Right.
And I'm 100% convinced that will be a very good corporate investment once you actually get the CEO and the CFO looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet and making sure food safety is in a revenue protection column and not in a cost of doing business column.
Absolutely. And that's us getting out of our bubble and teaching these other groups why this is important. From a personal standpoint, it's like, well, you have auto insurance, right? Auto insurance isn't cheap, right? You're protecting against an incident that may not happen, but if it does happen, could potentially be catastrophic. It's a cost we understand from a personal level, but for some reason, once it gets to a business side, it just kind of evaporates into the ether. This is an important investment in the company. And it's part of our job to be able to communicate, persuade, and influence. So these groups at corporate who cascade this risk down to the manufacturing facilities understand it. So perfect. That's a great summary, Doug. I appreciate that. So with that, guys, we're going to close out our chat here for today. Another fantastic one. I always love having you on the chat, Doug. It's always such a fantastic conversation, and you and I. This is why we're friends, right? It's so easy to talk back and forth on these things. And of course, I want to thank my sponsor here for the chat as well, Culture Advisory Group. Fantastic team up there. Brett is on the chat here as well, and they have their website, cultureadvisorygroup.com. And today as well is a webinar heavy day, Doug. I am also the guest here in an hour on a webinar with the great Cara Mickelson over at ChemStation. And we're going to be talking about holistic risk assessment and what is this thing and how does this actually work? You hear me talk about it here on the chat, but this is really something that is getting a lot more understanding in companies. Frank Giannis has been out there talking about these topics. And it's something that is really important, and I think people need to get an understanding of. And there's a link to the webinar that I'm trying desperately to copy here, and I did it incorrectly. So here we go again. Third try. There it is. So all you got to do is go to that link, sign up. And again, Cara and I will be talking about risk here at 10 a.m. Mountain here on Friday, so noon East Coast time. So hopefully everybody here will be able to join me over there. If you haven't had enough of my crap already, you're going to get another hour of it. And so thank you everybody for joining the chat. Always amazing. It was a fantastic conversation back and forth. And of course, Dr. Marshall, always awesome having you on. It's going to be a great weekend out there. Hopefully it's great where you're at as well. Get out there and enjoy it. Have a little bit of fun. And of course, take care of the food supply. We appreciate all that you do. And we'll see you back here next Friday. So thanks a lot. And we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.